Hi, this is Tasheena.
And this is Jonathan.
And this is We Watch What We Watch, a podcast where the two of us come together and chat and talk about movies and TV.
And today we're fresh off our Shogun journey, and we are back real quick for a few movies, the Halloween season, for this Halloween special. And today we are talking about Deep Red.
Profondo Rosso if you're nasty.
Yeah, this is a Italian giallo film, so not what we've typically talked about.
I've watched a fair amount of giallo movies, probably 20 plus at this point. I don't know, there's just something about them. It's a good time. I always have a good time when watching them.
Yeah, I don't watch any horror at all, so I asked her just pick something out for Halloween, and I will grit my teeth and watch it. But this wasn't too bad.
There's definitely ones that are more violent, probably more uncomfortable in terms of sexual assault and taboo areas. This one, it has a lot of great moments, but it's not as intense as some of the other ones, especially with it kind of being one of people considered the top tier giallo. It's actually surprising that it's not more insane.
Gotcha. So it gets interesting because there's some pretty
there's pretty insane parts in here, but I've seen a couple that are just whoa. Along with this, so after the movie, we also watched a documentary called All the Colors of Giallo, which is based off the title of a famous giallo movie. There a lot of good information.
Oh, a lot of information spoken at about 5,000 words a minute.
Would you imagine if it's on 2 times or something like that? I'm pretty sure I'd have a heart attack.
That guy did not take any breaths.
So the documentary, though, was a bit slapdash.
Yeah, it sort of just meanders through the history of giallo in Italy, and
talks about some of the top directors, the notable ones. And yes, a lot of good information, but the expert who talks throughout most of the film is talking so quickly.
It's kind of a one big run-on sentence, and
yes,
they could have used some editing to break it into more, because it's a lot of, and another notable director is, and another notable example is, and another notable, so it's just, there's not a whole lot of structure to it. Aside from this director.
Did they only give him a couple hours and he's just oh, I got to get it all in? Was he giving a very short window to record?
I feel like they knew they wanted to do a documentary. They knew this guy was an expert. They had him talk just whatever he wanted to talk about for, an hour, a couple hours.
Just put a camera up
and then they used that as the basis of the whole documentary, and use that to seek out other interviews.
Yeah, he was definitely the through line was him talking, and so they would just kind of go off from.
Yes, they didn't really have much of a plan. They let him talk. They followed up on some things he had said. Went down some rabbit holes. They're wait, they're still talking about this. A
little disappointing, but I do think some great gems from directors. I liked them talking to the different directors who were notable in the giallo era of Italian film. So if people don't know, this was a huge era in Italian film, predominantly in the 70s. There was definitely some, people say the first one was 63 with The Evil Eye, or AKA The Woman Who Knew Too Much, something like that. And went into the late 70s. There's arguments here and there about what is a giallo and what's not. But the name means giallo in Italian, and it's because the crime novels back in the day had these really predominant yellow covers with a picture and a circle right in the middle. You knew what that novel was going to be like. Giallos had certain tropes to them. And so that crossed over into movies. And it just caught on wildfire for a while. And it also influenced a lot of international cinema, especially American slashers.
Yeah, they talked about, what was the name of the one that became the inspiration for
Bay of Blood.
Friday the 13th. Was it Friday the 13th?
I honestly think Friday the 13th was more of a rip of Halloween. But I think Texas Chainsaw, Halloween, like all those slasher movies, especially with the point of view aspect of them, came from Giallo films.
Yeah, the point of view, the number of kills, like the focus on the kills.
I think it's the plural of Giallo. Whatever. I say Giallo, sorry if that's incorrect. Sorry, my Italian speakers out there. But yeah, A Bay of Blood is the one that really... you could see the influence on American cinema. I would say also there's one called Torso, which I watched it and it had very slasher vibes. And I actually liked a lot more than A Bay of Blood. It was almost like a cross between like the Giallo like detective type of feel and like a modern day slasher like integrated together.
Yeah, it was interesting to see how everyone sort of influenced each other. Because a lot of the directors spoke about how they were inspired by works out of Hollywood in the 50s and before, and then that ended up going back and influencing the slasher genre and all this stuff.
Yeah, because noir was really popular here from like 40s into 50s. So then I can see like especially Hitchcock, all that like bleeding into the 60s of Italian cinema. So it's interesting. Sometimes people are like, think certain movies come in like a vacuum almost, but I'm like, no. We have like 100 years plus of cinema. Good directors are influenced by other directors.
Yep.
All right, so which leads us to our movie. I will try to give the best little summary I can.
Yeah, we will inevitably get into spoilers. I think we'll try and do a call out before we do any big spoilers.
Yeah. Guess you could spoil this movie though. It's one of those movies I feel like you just kind of you need to see a Giallo movie once in your life to kind of get the vibe, because these are definitely vibe movies. So we have our protagonist is Mark.
Oh hi Mark.
Oh hi Mark. And on his way home, he witnesses the murder of Helga, who is a medium, a psychic. Which is interesting. They usually don't have supernatural elements in Giallos, but this was a lighter one.
The director here was Dario Argento?
Yes.
Is that how you say it? Yeah.
Which also did Suspiria.
Yeah, and they talked about in the documentary that at this point in his career, he started doing more of these Giallos where the supernatural sort of made an appearance and was more the focus.
And even though it's more like this supernatural element is just kind of the inciting incident, there's really nothing after that. It's more just...
because at first you're like, oh, okay, so it's psychic. Okay, so that's part of the thing. But then, spoiler, she dies.
She dies, yeah.
Almost immediately. But not before pointing out...
She's at a conference.
They're doing a conference, and she's like, this isn't magic. I'm not seeing the future. I just am sensing things from people as they happen.
Yes.
More like ESP.
Yeah, almost like the thoughts they're having at this point in time. So I'm wondering if our killer, after she said I'm psychic, almost being afraid, and maybe the song...
Don't think about pink elephants.
I know, exactly. And that's when Helga goes into a fit of like, oh, darkness,
I see a murder. You have killed and will kill again. Yeah.
And so she goes home. She starts writing down everything that she saw, getting all the details down. And that's when the killer comes for her. Mark witnesses this. He is a jazz pianist. He is also English, which happens a lot in these Giallos. One of the tropes is a foreigner coming in, being like the outsider in the country, and then they witness this awful thing, and they are pulled in, and then they have to figure it out. And I saw it a few times throughout. This is definitely a popular trope.
Is that to give it like international appeal?
They talked about that in the documentary, that they got their main people were usually international stars.
Okay, yeah, it makes sense.
And so because of that, it almost created this. Yeah, it created this trope.
Tangential to that, what you also quickly notice is that everything and everyone is dubbed.
I actually saw a different version too, where everything was dubbed in English.
Yeah, but even if you're watching it, the original Italian, everyone is dubbed, which has its roots right in in the censorship of like the Mussolini era, and there was heavy censorship then.
Heavy censorship. Mussolini was so paranoid of propaganda that movies had to go to, I think, studios where they went to get dubbed. And so they would know exactly the dialogue that's in there.
They always dubbed the entire movie. The
entire movies.
Wow.
Oh, yeah, because I remember when my group, we watched Suspiria, and they're like, why does it seem off? Why is everything dubbed? I'm like, that's just how it was. Until almost recent, like I think 80s, maybe into the 90s, but I know the 80s.
That's not recently, honey. We're just old.
I know. But it was a good 40 years that they did this. So all the Italian movies you see during this time, they're going to be dubbed. And when I originally saw Deep Red, mine was an English dub and a shorter version too. It was like an hour and 40 minutes. And the one that we watched, Criterion, was the Italian dub, and it was 2 hours. So we actually watched 20 extra minutes than the original version I saw, which I feel like happened all because when it got help me here, distributed, yes, to internationally. I feel like they usually did different cuts, especially if it was longer. They'd make it shorter. They would do the English dub sometimes. For some of these, there are like a couple different versions. Like Dawn of the Dead, I think, has like 5 different versions. It's crazy. All right, so he witnesses it, and of course, he gets caught up in this.
Right.
And his sidekick, though honestly, sometimes I think she's in the lead, goes back and forth on who's the sidekick here, is the reporter Gianna, who is Daria Nicolodi. She's important because she worked a long time with Dario Argento, and they were together. They were a couple. So she's in a lot of this movie. But she's great in this movie. She's a reporter. She is there on the scene of the crime while they're talking to Mark. She takes a picture of him, and in the paper says, like,
eyewitness my killer. So he's like, oh, great. Now they know that I'm...
So that puts a target on Mark's back, because I don't think the murder even, like, really registered him.
So it's all her fault. But no, that sort of drives like a little wedge in the relationship, but they're still like working together sort of on and off to try and solve the case.
I feel like a lot of the extra 20 minutes we saw is more of their relationship.
Yeah.
There's other details too, but I feel like those were the parts that were definitely cut out. And then after that, it's pretty much Mark trying to find out who the killer is, because not too long after the paper comes out, the killer comes after him and tries to kill him. So he's like, I feel like I need to solve this before the killer gets me.
And of course, in another staple of Giallo, the police are no help.
Oh,
so you can't trust them. Yeah.
At the scene of the crime, the main cop has a sandwich in his hand, and he's questioning Mark, just going, arm. Which, it's interesting. I feel like sometimes the police are super incompetent, and sometimes because they're like more detective-y. There's also this trend of cop movies in Italy going on around the same time. So there was a couple of the giallos that kind of cross paths with like this cop genre, and so that's usually when the cops were more of a positive light.
Gotcha.
But it's interesting, sometimes the cops are like clowns. Who knows what you're gonna get.
And basically he's just keep trying to follow these leads, but the murder keeps coming after the relevant people who can shed some light on this. So you get some very interesting kills.
And sometimes he's just a lucky SOB that gets information, and I'm just like, wow, that was very coincidental. But that's just Giallo. In the documentary, there's this one guy who's like, there's rules to Giallo, and it has to be logical. And I'm like, maybe the books, but have you watched these movies, sir? Like, sometimes they get information, and it's just random. It's like, there's a part where Mark finds out about the house from a colleague of Helga, the lady who's murdered, because he's talking to two of the colleagues, and he's like, oh, a child song. Oh, that reminds me of this house I read in a book where children were screaming. It really, they have nothing to do with each other. And yet he's like, oh, go find the house of the book. It's stuff like that. It's shortcuts. Like, I get it. It's fine. And you could say that guy was also apparently had some psychic abilities, so maybe he just intuited that this house...
Yeah, wait, did they say that he did?
In the very beginning, when they introduced all three of them
wasn't he?
At the conference, which, by the way, the conference at the cold opening was in this beautiful building, like this Italian opera house, but with like Saw-level bathrooms.
Yes.
All right. Any scenes that you want to talk about? Anything that really like jumped out at you, since this is your first go at Giallo?
Yeah, my first. So, I mean, generally, I thought it was a good time. It was interesting. My issues with horror is usually I don't like reveling in, and this word is overused, but I'm going to use it. I don't like reveling in like what I feel like is misery porn.
I get that, yes.
And I feel like a lot of that is more modern stuff where, this is going to sound really overly specific, but I feel like because acting, everyone knows how to act now or what they think is acting, and you get all these people trying to really like sell how like scared or, you know, in pain they are. Like they've almost gotten too good at selling that. And so I just don't like watching that kind of suffering. But when you go into something more of this era, it's a little more campy, a little more heightened. Obviously, the effects aren't as good. You know, that's an obvious one, which helps sort of break that, to be able to, in my mind, separate it as, you know, not real. You know, the screams and everyone's just so dramatic, and it helps make it a little more fun rather than my brain trying to, no, that person's an actual, like, no, they're clearly not. They're clearly acting.
Yes, that to me is the fun of Giallo. Like, it sounds sadistic, but it is like the creativity of the kills. Because, like you said, it's not real. And so I can have fun with it because it's campy, it's fun. Like, there's nothing that's like, oh, this is serious, it's very real.
Right.
Now, sometimes they do tackle serious subject matters. Yeah. And I think that's probably more where the disturbing aspects get to me, is when certain subject matters and taboo that they do in Giallo, but only maybe a couple of them, like violence-wise, got to me. I feel like, and it's probably why I like Argento so much, because of the way he does his kills. Yeah, there is a part of your brain that knows it's not real, but he goes all in, and they're very creative.
Right. You start to feel like the rest of the movie is just these connecting tissues in between. We're gonna have set up this great kill set piece here and here and here. So that also struck me with like the cinematography and everything when we start getting into kills with the POV shots, and sometimes he would like lock the camera to like a moving object that you would follow, like the knife going down.
Yes.
Like all these very creative things, especially for the era, because I remember when we were going through our top on our movie list, which we still haven't finished, but
one day.
It was always interesting spotting the, you know, older classic movies that would have more flat cinematography, because that's just what they were used to, and which ones really started to push the boundaries of what you could do with a camera. And I felt like all throughout the movie, he's thinking about how to use the camera in a way that enhances the tension and the suspense in an interesting way.
Oh, yes. I really, every time they do a close-up of the black gloves or like a shing of the knife, for some reason that just brings joy to my heart. Also, the extreme close-ups, I love that. And the beginning with the goblin music hitting hard, you know, and it's going throughout just like all those little trinkets, like in close up, just details like that. He's really good at visuals. Oh, I think one of my favorite setups was actually when the killer tries to kill Mark for the first time, and he's at the piano. They do a lot of different close-ups. There's one where they go from the window when they first go into his room, and it's almost like a quick zoom to him. There's just all these little touches.
It almost makes you think it's really a POV shot, but it's not.
It's not.
And I think they mentioned that in the documentary too, like playing with POV and then faking POV, which would always keep you on your toes. Like, oh, it's gonna. Oh, okay, that wasn't the murder. Oh, is this murder? Oh, that was. Yep. Stuff like that to keep you guessing.
And the doc, I believe, also mentioned that he was the first to like choreograph kills, which I think is also important. Instead of just like, they struggle. Yeah.
No, yeah, they were very choreographed.
Yes. You walk here, you do this, especially. So the killer got one of them in a very horrific way. And the way it's done, it is very like A to B to C to D. It's not something that you could just improv.
Yeah.
Anything else before we talk about? Any spoilers?
Did we want to talk about the... I guess we have to get into spoilers for this. Yeah, I guess... I mean, it's an old movie, but spoilers from here on
1975. But if... I had to say, if you're interested in watching Giallo, any of Dario Argento's movies during this time are great. Even when he gets more into... I would call supernatural horror. I know some people consider Suspiria Giallo, but I don't. It's like about witches. There's no like this. It's more supernatural.
Yeah. And I would say but
it's amazing.
Yeah. And they are probably good, even though they are older movies, and therefore I would recommend going into them without getting spoiled, because a lot of them are about like keeping you guessing about who might be responsible, and you're trying to figure it out. And yeah, there's going to be shortcuts and some cheats. But for the most part, I think there are enough things that you could piece it together to where that makes it interesting. So going into it without being spoiled is nice.
It makes the ride fun.
Yeah.
Because some of these endings are wild. All right. So we're ready to talk about
sure.
The ending. So what did you want to talk about?
His partner, the reporter lady.
Mm-hmm.
She's very interesting. Kind of manic. But
yes, her ideas.
They have some of this, back and forth about like women versus men, and
they even have an arm wrestling contest.
Like an arm wrestling contest.
I don't know. It was great.
And Mark's all, well, women is more delicate, and men are strong and have intelligence and all this stuff. Basically, he's very dismissive of her because she's a woman.
Yes, which is interesting because not that he's not flamboyant, but he's definitely has some feminine qualities about him.
He's not a macho man.
Exactly, where I feel like Gianna has a lot of masculine qualities. Mm-hmm. So I feel like they're both a little bit in the general gender neutral kind of.
Yes.
So it's interesting how some of his takes are very misogynistic, even though I'm like, dude, she could beat your ass. What are you talking about? And it leads to him thinking the killer
has to be a man.
Has to be male.
This whole time.
He only saw the back with the hat, the trench coat. He never saw anything else and automatically assumed that the killer was a male.
Mm-hmm. And of course, spoiler alert, turns out it's a woman. And not just a woman, an older woman.
Yes. Who was completely out of his peripheral,
Even when he's interacting, because he does interact with her before this, even when he's interacting with her for other reasons, he barely acknowledges her sort of presence. He's just trying to get to someone else.
Mm-hmm. Yes, because before he witnesses Helga's death, he's actually talking to his friend Carlo, who is also another pianist. And there's also some back and forth about Carlo's doing this to eat, like he has to work to eat, while Mark is doing this because he loves it. He doesn't need to work to eat. So it's interesting dynamic of them having the same positions or the same jobs in different economic situations.
Mm-hmm.
And then poor Carlo, he's just like a broken man.
Yeah.
And you
alcoholic.
Find out why. It's because his mommy is the killer, and he witnessed it as a child.
Yeah.
And so at first you find out he's a part of it, and it seems like he is the lone killer. But Mark knows there's something still in his mind, because at the beginning, Carlo was outside and saw the killer when they left, and that's when he pieces together there's a second person who we find out is Mommy Dearest. No wire hangers, pretty much.
Yeah, so there's this interesting dynamic going there with like gender roles and how his worldview blinds him to the possibility that the killer could have been someone other than what he imagined.
Yes. It's sadly a prevalent idea in the 70s. It's just something that was... there's some stuff in Giallo. I'm like, that is the 70s. Yeah. There is a lot of taboo stuff. Which is like, ooh. So, if it matters to you, I'll just say, might want to look up what type of Giallo you're getting into before you watch, because some of them have some pretty taboo subject matters.
Did those only start coming about after censorship started falling off, or was that like a response to like being able to tackle more things because you could get past the censors now?
Probably lightening up with the censorship, because I feel like those ones were definitely in the 70s, well into the 70s.
Yeah, I forget when they said that it started becoming more open.
I don't know.
I know in one of them they talked about they would throw in more explicit stuff that the censors would cut, so they'd feel happy that they cut it down and let the rest of it slide.
Pat themselves on the back for that. Yeah.
Gotta throw them a bone.
Yeah, make them feel better. All right. So one of the hallmarks, I would say, of Giallo. Oh, I finally did the plural right.
Is that the plural?
Yes, it is. Giallo is the plural. So one of the hallmarks of Giallo is there's just usually moments of insanity or craziness, just the ultimate WTF moments. And we definitely have a couple in Deep Red, but there's one we need to talk about that I love so much, and it has absolutely has no place whatsoever. This
none at all.
But I loved it. I every time I see it, it gives me a good laugh. I think it's mainly a distraction for the killer. I think that's the purpose. Look here. So let's set it up. So one of Helga's
associates.
Yeah, sure. The associate. He found some vital information. He's at home. He's trying to call up Mark, trying to get a hold of him. But of course, this is the 70s. Nobody has cell phones. Nobody knows where you are. And while he's home, he hears something. He goes into... he's drinking some tea in his office. And is it here that he hears the children's music first? He hears something.
Does he hear the music?
I don't know.
I feel like at some point they stop playing the music before the kills, where it's a little more logical inconsistency, but he hears something. He
definitely hears something because he starts shaking, he spills the tea, he goes to grab a weapon, and he's looking out towards... There's like a deck, like a...
Oh, I think the killer says their name. At this point, yes. They start saying their names.
Exactly. He just whispers his name. That's right, because with Gianna, they also did Gianna. Whispers his name. They're looking off towards like an open area, probably because if the killer...
It's like a balcony or something, some curtains.
And there's a little closet right off to the side. It's like in the side of the frame. Takes a beat. The door opens, and this puppet comes out, like a ceramic puppet.
Ceramic puppet of like a child emerges from the closet and just charges, going me.
And the weapon he has in his hand, he takes it and he just chunks it on the head. It falls with its head like split apart, and then it's like you could see some of the mechanics inside. Yeah. And he's distracted by the fuck did that come from? That the killer comes up behind him and murders him. But
at no point before this was any hint of animatronic dolls suggested. Maybe, I guess the closest you get is like all the little trinkets that the killer had in the beginning, like they were looking through.
So it does seem like the killer is kind of in a childlike state.
That's probably the closest you could get to this making sense. Is it's like a big toy.
Because we do see like the doll hanging down from the news when the other lady dies. Yeah, it's the only connection I can make, other than Dario knew the guy who made E.T.
Yep.
And he's like, make me a puppet. Make me something, and I will put it in my movie. Doesn't matter if it fits or not. The
documentary is the person who made this puppet is literally the same person who created E.T., the animatronic. And he's like, can you make me a doll that can walk?
So even if you have no desire to watch this movie, just look up this scene or look up the pictures. Like you put in Deep Red on Google, this doll pops up because it's so iconic to this movie because it's just so random. It is a really cool looking puppet.
And it would probably freak you the fuck out if it suddenly emerged from a closet and came at you.
I would also be like, what is happening? Was there any other major like WTF moments in this movie? I can't.
The only other one that approached this level of comedy is the death of Carlos at the end.
Oh.
Because he runs out, gets like sideswiped by a garbage truck, which has a random hook or wire hanging off it, which happens to snag his leg.
Yes.
And then he proceeds to get dragged through the streets by this oblivious crew. I think it's a garbage truck.
Yeah, it's a garbage truck, and the two men are in the front.
And they keep cutting to them, just like, and this guy's like,
in the back.
Every turn they take, he gets whacked against one side of the street and the other. And then, to make sure he's dead, a car runs over his head.
It's such a grand kill that a part of me, even though I knew there was a second killer, I mean, he's like, is there just one? Because this seems like a kill for like the big boss, this type of kill. But I guess it just wouldn't have worked with our second killer. So
it's pretty cathartic because you've seen what you presume to be them having killed all these people pretty brutally. So it gives you some nice catharsis, but it is almost like funny. It's just how.
Yeah, it's almost like Rube Goldberg. Yeah, it's just like whoa, and I guess the lady killer, she does get a pretty rough end.
Yeah.
Probably not as rough as Carlo, but it is still pretty rough. Anything you want to say about the ending?
So it's interesting. I thought I had figured it out halfway through who it was. In hindsight, I fell for an intentional misdirection on their part where they tried to make you think it was the reporter lady. Like, what's her name? I gotta stop calling her the reporter lady.
Gianna.
Ugh. Anyway.
There's usually a red herring.
Yeah. I can't decide if it was a good red herring. Well, I guess it was good because it got me, but I almost felt like it was cheating a little bit. But again, like you said, there is some cheating in these where they just sort of pull things out and because they're just trying to throw you off.
Yeah, the first time I watched it, the only time I was like, I don't know, she's a little suspect, was after the fire when she pulled him out. I'm like, was it because she was already there? Did she start the fire?
Logically, and again, if you start applying logic to these, you're going to have a bad time.
The fire.
But it almost doesn't make sense that he would have been attacked by the murder in there and been left alive. I guess he was left to die in the fire, but there are some instances where I don't think logically it makes sense. But again, if you try and apply logic to a film like this,
so I think
you're going to find holes and you're going to...
I think the fire, that part... Carlo was there. I think Carlo started the fire, and that's why he hit him, but maybe couldn't kill him.
Okay.
Because it sounds like Mama Dearest definitely did most of the killings. It's hard to tell who did what, but I really think because Carlo was there at the school.
Well, I guess you probably could figure out who did them if they ever showed the trench coat and the gloves, because I think only the mother ever wore the trench coat and the gloves.
Okay.
And I don't think when he was knocked out in the house and left to die in the fire, I don't think you saw...
Yeah, he was just hit in the head. Yeah. You didn't see anything.
So you're right.
I really think that's Carlo. And yeah, it's like, I know he has to die because he knows, but...
So leaving him...
plunging, yes.
Yeah, leaving him to die is a little easier to do than... Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, well, then, yeah, never mind that. that covers that. But yeah, so they make her look really suspicious there because she's just talking in a weird way. And, she happened to pull him out of the fire. And then later on, when they're looking at the records, she goes off on her own and like, and he comes across the corner and finds her stabbed. I'm like,
You thought she stabbed herself.
Because he's right there next to the chalkboard and it just moves. So like, okay, she goes in there drawing it. And then, he's coming and stabs her. So I'm like, okay, so if she doesn't die, she's definitely the killer. But she wasn't the killer. So it was a pretty good fake out.
Yeah, because that would have worked too as a 2-person killer. Like if she was a sister, that could have worked because that happens a lot.
That's what I assumed was.
You meant okay.
Because I mistook.
That definitely happens a lot. It's usually if there's a pair, there's usually a family pair.
So they in the opening they show someone getting stabbed like in a silhouette, and then they show the kid walk into frame, and I thought it was a girl, so I was thinking, okay, so it's the reporter. This was when she was younger, and then when there was revealed to be 2 people, I'm like, okay, sibling, and then Carlos, I'm like, okay, so they're gonna secretly be siblings, but that turned out not to be the case. But it was plausible enough.
Yes. No, I think,
and in some ways,
could have had some. Yeah.
In some ways, I am glad that they didn't do a secret sibling reveal because there was no clues to that. So that would have come out of nowhere.
Because you already knew the relationship between Carlo and his mom.
Exactly, yeah. All those were already introduced. That was already there.
So it wasn't like this random lady where she's like, surprise, I'm also his mother.
When he called her again, the mother, near the end, and she keeps saying, I used to be an actress. I was thinking for a second, maybe it's her.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, well, now I've already figured it out that it's the reporter. So I dismissed it. But there are definitely sometimes where by mentioning characters again, they sort of can tip their hand because like, why bring up this minor character again unless, but I was already sold in it being the reporter, so I didn't clock it.
That lady was great though. Kept calling him an engineer. I'm like, is she just fucking with him? Because she kind of came off as not the sharpest.
Mm-hmm.
And just talked a lot, like an old lady just talking along, and and all that.
Yeah, I think in hindsight it's because she's insane, right?
Yes. The house was cool. I love that house. The big yellow house.
The murder house.
Mm-hmm. And the one was like slap. I cannot talk.
Yeah, all I could think of was, man, it's probably full of mold.
Oh, he might have survived this episode, but I think the black mold, the asbestos, whatever, his infected cut on his finger.
He's definitely dying of cancer soon.
It's not going to be a good long life for him. It will catch up at some point. Because, he cuts his hand, and at one point, he goes into the murky water in the basement, which probably has been there for like decades, and just sticks his hands in. I'm like, no, stop!
Real killer was infection the whole time.
Also, he finds there is a mural on
mural?
the mural.
No, mural.
No, it's on the wall, and he sees a little bit of it underneath the paint. So he tries to scrape the paint off. At first, he's using his fingers.
That got to me.
And I'm like,
that actually disturbed me more than anything else. I've seen him scrape at this drywall with his fingernails. It's like, ugh.
And he plays the piano for a living. I'm like, dude, those are your money makers. Oh, I forgot to do my letterbox thing.
No, might as well whip it out now.
Okay. Whoa now. So I usually don't talk about the top review on Letterboxd to try to go deep into the stacks because they get enough attention. But the top comment on this movie is Patrick Williams.
Oh.
Who we watch his videos on movies and love them. So I want to give him a little shout out here. He says, uses a brilliant cinematic technique where every time someone is about to die, it plays the coolest music in the world. So every murder scene turns into a dance party.
Yep.
And honestly, if I go out, God, I hope Goblin is playing in the background.
Yeah, which just goes to, back to what we were saying about how the kills are the production and everything else is just stringing along until you get to that point.
Every time that music hit, I was dancing.
Which makes me think they probably could have some of the stuff that they cut out for the English dub version probably was good to cut out Because if you're there for the meat of those choreographed, cinematic kill scenes, you want a little bit less of that. But they overcut in some places that I think was better to keep it in.
Yes, the edited version did make for a quicker, tighter version where you just you're hitting all the
so if you need
high points,
something a little shorter, a little more abbreviated, and you don't like subtitles, go for the English dub.
Yeah, or and I know it's about an hour and 40 minutes is that version. Who knows? It might also be different dubbed versions. Who knows? Who knows? All right. Anything else you want to say about the movie or Giallo before we wrap up?
Yeah, it was a good time.
Yay! I'm so glad you liked it. I thought this was a strong one. I think it's a good one to enter into the world. For next time, we are going to watch Cure. Do you remember me talking about that?
Yes.
So I mentioned it in our Longlegs review because I felt Longlegs was a broke down version of Cure. Just that I feel like the subject matter Cure from I think it's from 1997. It just did the subject matter more justice, like what they were going for, instead of Hail Satan.
Hail Satan.
Hail Satan. All right. So that's it for Deep Red.
All right. Happy Halloween.
Ooh, have a good spooky time. Bye.
See you next week.